County Board of Education special work session, Tuesday, April 25th, 2023 at 5 o'clock. And at this time, we'll stand for a moment of silent reflection. Thank you very much. Going forward with the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, number 3, we do have an action item, ZMM change order. Number 1, request to add asphalt to the Nicholas County Memorial Walking Trail.
Yes, that's actually the official title for that project. It's the Richwood Memorial Walking Trail, but again, it's not my project, and when people outside of the county deal with things, they look and they often use county names. That's what they did on this project. So this is their project and that's their name. That's why it says that on their document. So they did a change order request for it's $36,500 for the asphalt. And I think that if this is approved, they will get that poured as early as next week. And again, this is not from our funds, it is not our project, but it's on our property.
Which is the reason we have to, I've been asked that. So, yeah, I was asked why we have to approve something that we don't have control over, and I said because it was on our property.
That's the reason I was given.
And it doesn't come out of our FEMA allotment. It doesn't come out of the board money. It's separate FEMA money that the federal government pays for.
And then there was a contract price reduction in the amount of $2,970 because the plants specified on the drawings were actually smaller plants used, and because of that, there was a credit back to the account for that amount of money.
Is FEMA keeping up with that account, or is?
We have to process it. That's what this document is. It was a FEMA project because Richwood High School was had to be memorialized because it was of a certain design that was unique for the time period, and because of that, it was has to be memorialized. And so FEMA actually had the hearings. They took control. That was their project. And then, of course, the representative for the state was the School Building Authority. And so the School Building Authority stepped up to actually carry out the functions decided upon by the group, which had all the different signatories. And the SBA, that was there under their control. And so now everything has been handed to us since it's on our property to do the approval. I mean, I didn't really like the fact of having to do the approval on any of this stuff, but I was told it's because it's on our property.
I understand, I'll go back to my OEPA days. What gets monitored gets done and gets done right.
Mm-hmm.
And that why we're here today is because what has been done apparently has not been monitored closely for the quality of what's being done. I mean, that's just my opinion from the pictures I saw. I have not been over there, but my belief is, my hope is, and I don't think you can answer this because you don't know, but somebody, we need to monitor this. If it's going to be done here soon, we need to monitor, for the quality, that it gets done right, and that it looks as it should. It's a memorial, and so I would just hope that SBA would step up and do the appropriate monitoring. That's just my concern.
I've addressed those concerns. I plan myself to continue to look at the project every other week. After the pavement, and again, the asphalt, if this is approved tonight, it will actually be laid next week. And then the only thing left is going to be the signs, the signage.
Who drew up I'm assuming that ZMM drew up the specs on this pavement that's to be put down? And
Yes.
okay, so they drew up the specs and with the requirements.
We had zero involvement in it.
Okay. All right.
But apparently, the stone that's been laid on the track, none of that has to be removed. They said it was just a matter of adding pavement, top coat. The only other thing that I would personally like to do, that I've been talking to our Alan about, our maintenance director, is coming up with something to keep people from running over and, destroying the walkway. That's not something that was even, in the specs. Their concern was having the walkway, but my concern is protecting the walkway now that it's going to be completed. A lot of people just may not realize, they may drive over, I don't know. So we need to figure out some attractive ways. So I'm looking at different things that we can do to protect it. And hopefully after that, people, there could be potential to put picnic tables and I plan to come back and talk to this board about options. It's a total of 36 months from the date of the contract that the board has to maintain that area. And then at the conclusion of that, and what I'm going to have to go back and check, is it from the date of the completion of the work or the date of the application? And I'll get back and let you know that for sure. But at that point, it's something that I will come back and ask the board if you would like to consider giving this to the city if they have a desire to have it, or if they don't have a desire to have it donated, then a 501c3 could actually accept this property to maintain. I mean, it could be really beneficial for the community. But again, that's something that I would ask the board. I just don't think that's something we should retain.
If there is a problem with what they do next week or whenever, of course, that needs to be taken up with the SBA and not with us, because we are not doing it.
Correct.
Okay. And again, I wonder if there's maybe some, well, I guess us and some others could look at that to agree that it is the type of work that should be, or it's okay, or whatever. And because what might happen is they'll do a job, and then a year or two down the road they'll come back to the county and say, you all need to go in there and redo that because it's your property. Now that is a fear that I have, that they'll come back and have to do everything over again or something of that nature.
So the architect is the one that determined the 2-inch thick asphalt paving, and as being an appropriate paving for that. And so, that's in their specs. We haven't had any difficulties with that contractor at all. They've done exactly as they were told to do. So we haven't had any issues with that. Honestly, the only people you have to rely on is the architect that designed it, because I'm not an engineer, and we don't have engineers at this school, in the school system, to go out and say whether that's appropriate or not. So really, the only people that SBA has to rely on is what do the architects say. So it's ZMM as the architects of the project.
If you're going to drive on it, 2 inches would not be appropriate, but it's a walking track, so.
That's why I feel like we need to get something up to keep people from.
There's already rock down, correct?
Yes.
There's already rock down. Is it down in the ground, or is it just on top of the ground?
No, they dug down probably 6 or 8 inches in gravel that
Yeah.
filled it in.
So they're going to just now
top coat it.
Okay, all right. Well, I hope SBA monitors that, so, because we want
Was
to.
was ZMM in charge of the original project?
They did the design for SBA, so the SBA did the original design. And they designed the signs, everything. Then the SBA handed the project off to ZMM. And once that happened, ZMM discovered that it was drawn in the floodway. So because of that, then ZMM actually had to pull it up and do the design work for it. That's what happened. So, the SBA they're not an engineering firm that goes out and draws those specs, but because it was a FEMA project, it was one of those things that FEMA handed off and said, well, SBA, can you do this? Well, they attempted, but then when they got the contract to actually do the design work, it had to be redone and moved in a different location and follow the specs. So the MOU that I sent each of you board members, what's it been, maybe 6 weeks ago, it told all the signatories, it told the outlines of everything required to be in this design work. And then I was not happy with, again, I was not a signatory. I was only a signatory to making sure that the library had items in it, such as trophies and things like that. But as far as this project, I was not a signatory to. So anyway, I went back and talked to Lundy Bailey, and I asked him, I said, would you please, when I saw the title on the first sign as the Nicholas County Memorial Walking Track, I said, that's a problem. That's not Nicholas County Memorial Walking Track. That might be your project name, but this is Ridgewood Memorial Walking Track. So then Lundy Bailey was able to look at that along with a couple of other people and to correct the signage, to add appropriate things and actually redesign. So we paid out of our funds to have the signs redesigned because I did not think the ones that they originally had were appropriate or acceptable.
Well, who actually put the gravel down? ZMM?
No,
No.
the
This
contractor.
How much were they paid?
They were paid the amount, $386,700.
For gravel? Well, why didn't somebody go back to them and say, you didn't do it right?
They did do it
They
right.
didn't do it right. It didn't call for pavement.
You didn't call for pavement. It called to go down so deep, to do this certain design, to put these trees in, have the plaques made with a certain species of wood, and that's what it was for. They did not do anything wrong. The contractor did exactly what was on the plan.
So somebody dropped the ball between
Yeah,
the design and what went out for bid.
Right.
it sure did.
SBA signed off on asphalt with the MOA that I sent you all. I don't have any idea what happened, but I do know that I'm the one that caught it, and I'm the one that brought attention to it.
So all we're doing is approving that they put the pavement on the gravel on our property.
Yeah.
Is this the final thing for this project? or-
Well, we're waiting on the signs, so as soon as the
Signs.
signs come back and those get erected, it'll be finished.
And there was supposed to be some tree planting?
The trees are already
They're
planted.
planted?
They're small trees, yeah.
Are they gonna make well, of course, that lies in the future, a picnic area there, or?
No. It has, it called for the two benches that sat in front of Ridgewood High School, for those to be moved if possible. The contractors looked at those and said that if they moved those benches, they would probably fall apart. So I didn't want the benches destroyed. I said, so leave the benches there from where they sat in front of the school and put new benches at that location. I mean, I didn't want them destroyed. I mean, if they were going to go in and try to pick them up and they break apart, I mean, that's not going to serve a purpose. But again, my big concern is, and I want to do it out of, our school funds, I feel like we need to find a way to protect that walkway from being destroyed.
You're talking about the one that we paid.
Yes. Yes, because if not, I mean, people could potentially drive up, they could drive over the walkway, they could run over trees, they could, I mean, because the trees are small. And if they're not protected, they could easily be destroyed.
Kind of used to parking over there.
Well, after the schools were removed, yeah, they started parking there. You know, I'm not sure why they didn't park at the, you know, there's a lower level.
Closer
I
to
mean,
the field.
Yeah, yeah.
Problem.
But again, we've thought about ideas of putting, like, digging down and putting 4x4 posts sticking out maybe 2 foot high or something, close enough that people can't drive in. I don't want a fence up that's going to disturb the aesthetics of the area. You put some fence up that's high, it's going to make people feel that they're not welcome to walk in and walk on that track. If you put something high, again, it could take away from the visual appeal of the location. But if we can put something up just high enough to keep people from driving over and destroying it. So, again, that was just a couple of the things. We've looked at different things, but I want to do something real, you know, attractive around it.
Well, there is no parking area there. There's no parking area within distance of the football field except down in the plaza. Actually, that's why everybody parks there.
And we got to make
There's
sure.
no
we
parking
protect it.
area provided.
Now, they could park at the lower part before they get to the field area. I mean, they can park on that side as well.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to keep them out
Yeah, we've got to find
because they're
those.
used to it.
Yeah, we got to find some way to protect it. So I don't know, you know, I don't know. We're looking for
You
things.
would think some kind of wooden fence would be more aesthetic rather than the metal fence.
Well, I hate to put a tall fence, that's why I was hoping that we could put something maybe just that's up a couple foot or something, and, you know, I want it to be something that looks good. I don't know if you leave it natural wood, I don't know if you paint it black, I don't know, you know, if you paint it orange, I don't know. But we need to do something. And so we're looking at our options. Just like the little fence that was in front of Richwood High School, that's out of the little metal fence, that's really, the little metal rail. I said, well, something like that would be perfect. But I don't know where you would get that or how to get that anymore. But that's short and it serves a purpose.
Vocational made it
Did
at the
they?
end of the day.
Yeah. Well,
Oh, the
way
pipe,
back
the one was made with pipe.
in the 60s
See, I think
or
that looks,
50s.
I think that looks
Yeah.
good personally. But
Yeah, they would have made that down the shop.
But I don't think we have time.
Help that.
That'd take a while.
But you wouldn't have to go very high because people aren't going to cross it if they know they're going to drag their vehicle
Yeah.
bottom out of it.
Yeah, I just hate to take away the look of the trail.
Up around 3 different fence posts, got them off. Something like that. A good tractor,
Maybe
driver, drive.
put one rail
That's-
through it.
That's kind of what we were talking about, doing some kind of treated post
Maybe cedar
and
or
just going up a
something.
couple foot.
I asked Tom how much it would cost to have one of those signs made. If they had it.
Oh,
Yeah, with this one, he said about 3,500. Did that post for 750?
Three something, 380.
Maybe it's low but I like that.
oh, I do too.
Get a nice swing through your yard. But anyway, something aesthetic like that, I think would look good with that material. Maybe the metal if you can't.
It would be nice, wouldn't it?
But they're the one, again, you'd have to talk, well, I guess we could do that after we do the other.
Yeah, that's not involved in the contract. That's just something
Yeah.
that I just think we need to do.
And we're gonna have to do it this summer.
We
before
need to do
football
it
season.
quickly, yes.
Okay, let's move on here. We have a motion to accept the action item for the change order to request to add asphalt.
So moved.
Dr. Penix makes a motion. Do I have a second?
Before it's got it.
Second by Mr. Moose. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that brings us to budget workshop.
I was kind of waiting to see if Rick liked it. He's the expert.
All right.
All right, so we are going to talk about a preliminary budget for the upcoming school year, 2023-24. And so it is just a budget, and it's flexible, and it moves with actual revenues and actual expenses. And we get grants throughout the year to supplement this budget, and sometimes we have to make reductions in this budget based upon other assumptions that we've made in this budget. And I'll explain that in a little bit. But I'm going to start, and so if you have any questions along the way, just stop me. But I'm actually going to start with the expense section, because I want to come back and talk about this revenue section afterwards. So I have 2019, 2020, 21, and 22 actual activity. I've got through mid-April activity for this school year. I have last year's budget and then my proposed budget for this school year. And so what we do as far as payroll goes, we take into consideration the changes that you guys have made through personnel season, to the degree that we know how that affects our personnel in the county and the positions that it affects. And then our system calculates what the total payroll is going to be for each individual and all the fixed charges related to that person. Two significant things have happened in payroll. We had a $2,300 raise that was issued by the legislature to all personnel. And also, the PEIA premiums went up for not only the employees but the employer. So those are some big changes you're going to see. A spike in salary costs for everybody that we have employed under the state aid formula, or that's covered by the state aid formula. They have supplemented that funding to support the raise and PEIA increased costs for the employer. Now, the flip side of that is everybody that we hire over and above the state aid formula, and every day that we pay over and above 200 is a cost that the county has to incur. And that's just standard. So basically, the state covers who they say they will under the formula, and they support that through the state aid funding. But anything extra and above is a responsibility of the county, and the county has to come up with those funds on how to support those positions.
Okay, let me ask a question. So if you have a person who's employed who's outside of the formula, okay, let's say it's a teaching position that we, over and above what the state will fund, we're not only paying their salary, but we're also paying for the raise that they just got. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And all the fixed charges?
And their benefits.
And their benefits. Our employee cost for in PEIA for a family coverage is now about $14,000. Yeah.
Didn't they change that where one person was working for the board and their insurance covered the whole family? Now if you got two in the same family working for the board, both of them have to have insurance.
If you have a spouse, they did change that. If you have a spouse that is covered under their employer's coverage or has the ability to get health coverage by their employer, they can retain their coverage under our policy, but it's a $147 fee per month to keep that employee covered. So it's basically encouraging spouses to be covered under their own employer. So it's very expensive to maintain that.
That's the same for a child.
Yeah, just a spouse.
Prior to going up to 14,000, how much was it?
12.
12,
All right, so just kind of keep that in mind as we roll through these salaries you're going to see. So for last year's budget, I budgeted $8.3 million for, this is, in each section is broken down. So this first section, and you'll get the drift of that as we go, but this first section is instructional. So all of your instructional teachers and aides and any instructional service personnel you might have. Last year I budgeted $8.3 million, and this year it's $9.5 million. And then as far as subs go, I simply budget in this area the sub monies that's made available through the state aid formula, which for this year is $466,000. In the past, our sub costs were in excess of $800,000. So it's not near enough to cover the absences. They did start an incentive plan, and I haven't run any reports to see if that's had a material effect on the number of absences. So as we get here a little further, these are fixed charges, and that's all the employer taxes and insurance and retirements on those wages, which is $5.2 million. So total instructional salaries for next year is $15.2 million, as compared to the previous year, 13.4. Now, and I will say also, positions change, and so from one category to the next, or one year to the next, you might see a fluctuation in salaries. Could be up, could be more than in the past, could be less than the past, but it's just a revolving of positions and how they're classified, whether they're instructional or support personnel. This is our dental optical plan. I budgeted a total of $300,000 between these two lines. You can see in FY22 we spent $310,000 on that, and so far this year we spent $224,000. So we're going to try to get close to $300,000 next year. And then we have $150,000 for textbooks budgeted, and then $35,000 for educational activities. Anything you see in purple is something that's covered by the levy. And so we're required to budget. And so there's a lot of color coding in here, and some of it's just reminders to me, and others has a purpose.
What textbook adoption is this year? Is there one?
I'm sure there is. I don't know what.
Remember.
I could. So in total for instructional, we're at $15.7 million compared to 13.7 in the previous year. Most of that is up here in your salaries, 13 versus 15, and that's how this will go, each section. And so I will spend as much or as little time. If you want to ask any particular question about any area, just stop me. Preschool, we are in a collaboration with Nicholas County Head Start and Friends of Fun to provide preschool throughout the county. Our total preschool costs for salaries next year are $273,000. And our contribution to the collaborative is $275,000. And so grand total for preschool is $548,000. In addition to the monies that we contribute to this collaborative, we also do the maintenance on their buses and provide all fuel for their buses as well.
Do we have fewer students next year, or why is that drop? That's unusual with that.
Well, I budgeted 592 in the previous year. It could be a change in, well, it looks like a position change. So,
Yeah, quite a few.
We will, in the collaborative, sometimes we will, if we had to add a classroom or subtract a classroom, then we work with Head Start. Maybe they can provide the teaching position cheaper, or they want to provide the position. So I'd have to look into this and see. Again, the payroll system kicks that out, and I simply regurgitate that onto the spreadsheet.
And some of it could be that somebody with a lot of years' experience retired and you're hiring a new teacher at a much less rate.
Right.
That could be a little bit of it.
It could be a little bit, probably not that. That looks more like a teaching position. Or it could be some aides that are preschool aides that were in that last year and not this year. So yeah, we provide other services in addition to that. Next year, we're going to start providing snacks for the collaborative. We also do some busing on our buses for the collaborative. And it's something that I've been involved with over the years, and we work pretty well together to provide an ultimate goal of getting preschool out to as many kids that want it. And not every school has it, but we have limited monies to provide that, so we try to do our best and share those costs. Now we'll get into support services, and this is all these different types of positions. And you can see that total cost is $1.4 million next year versus the $1.398 last year. Some slight changes. I call these overhead. Anything outside of salaries is we consider overhead costs, and so I adjust those based upon what we've spent historically or anything that I know coming down the road that we might be incurring.
Kevin, what in the blue there? We can't read that from over here. What type of who is that?
Your attendance director, any social workers, secondary guidance, general guidance, nurses, psychologists. That's who it is.
How come the attendance director dropped about 50,000?
There was a combination of jobs.
Combination of jobs.
Put together.
Oh, so
Yeah.
there's two.
Yeah, we
So I got you. I
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah.
Now, Kevin, does that show, because we get the financial, we get the money from the state for those positions, or I forget how many different positions under that heading. Do you show,
I don't break that down individually. You'll see when we get to the revenue section, it's included in part of the state aid formula. But a large portion, it funds, don't quote me, but 17 or 18 of support staff in this category.
I was going to say, I think most, if not all, is covered through.
Yeah, oh yeah. Oh, in that category that we receive money for, you have positions, it's equal. I mean, the positions that are funded for, you have positions for that.
Yes, so we make sure those balanced out, so we don't have.
We have some staff development area. It has some salaries and benefits and stipends in it. $44,000. Then we get into technology area, and this one's a little weird. There's a thing that we have, it's called retirement on behalf, and it's a revenue allocation that comes in. It's for this year, they told us to book $3.9 million, but I make an allocation out to every single program function, these are called program functions, each one of these areas, based upon historical data of expense that were in those categories. So this number right here is, you notice there's no salary, but there's a fixed charge. And that's simply based upon expenses that have fallen in this program function in the past. So I know that looks a little weird, but historically, you can see, here's some expenses back here. I don't really like the presentation of that, but that's just the way we're supposed to allocate that. So that every program function gets a portion of that retirement on behalf of allocation.
Would the new TVs that we're considering go in that category?
They would fall into this program function, but they're going to be paid for out of federal funds. So this here is just our general fund. So we have the Special Projects Fund, which is federal and state grants, and then the federal stimulus monies.
So this would only include state funded and local funded?
State funding intended for the general fund, no state grants or anything like that, just the state aid formula and the state funding from the legislature for public school system and local funding.
The excess levy?
Right. Or interest or any miscellaneous revenues we may generate locally. There's $450,000 in the levy for technology and textbooks, so half of that, or nearly half, or a little over half, is in this category for technology. And you can say that has stayed pretty consistent between the 2 years. We get into general administration, that's your superintendent's office and the board members. And so you can see the totals there on salaries. They stay relatively the same. And then we get into a lot of expenses that fall into this category. And usually it's expenses that, like insurance and bonds and advertising that's done for at an administrative level. Not a big change. $651,000 budgeted last year, $674,000 this year.
Can you back up the board members? So, yeah,
That's not right.
that's what I was wondering.
Those are switched.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all it is. I've got these switched.
What's that central office?
Central office, yeah.
189? Pay rate. 1,000, I can't.
189.6.
Mr. Berry thought he was getting the pay raise.
Yeah, I'm glad you caught that.
Well,
Yeah, those should be switched. That's year to date on each one of those.
okay. That makes sense.
There.
I'm a numbers guy.
My fingers got a little carried away when I put them on there, apparently, or confused. All right, so here we go again. 651 last year, 674 this year. School administration, this is your principals and the secretaries at the schools. $2.5 million this year, $2.1 million, almost $2.2 million last year. Total salaries. And most of that's probably going to be attributed to the raise and how that affects they get, all of them are hired over 200, so their raise would be a portion that the county would have to pay over and above 200. We get in finance, and these are our salaries, and so 416,000 versus 420 last year. I didn't budget any overtime because we've not had overtime for quite some time in our area, so it went down a little bit. Then we have just some general things, some bonds and supplies. Personnel has its own section, 196 versus 181. And that includes secretary, or part of the secretary, all of the secretary, and a director. We get into maintenance. And maintenance is area that's covered under the excess levy, so we have some expenses in there as well. 2.3 in salaries versus 2.1 last year. Big areas of maintenance is utility costs. We're going to budget $600,000 for electric. In 2022, it was $584,000. We've already spent $461,000 through pretty much March, probably been billed through March, so we have 3 more months to get through, so we'll probably make that budget. Typically when I budget, it is just barely outside of what I think is realistic. So it's always going to be a little bit high, but nothing that it's nothing that's uncomfortably high. It's going to be pretty close to what I think it's going to be. And there's a lot of areas there in maintenance. Done this in the past, I'll continue to do it. I would put $100,000 in for anything that we may come up against that's in a flood, any flood-related expense, any unreimbursable expense, any expense that we incur that may not be FEMA reimbursed. So we're starting a little nest egg, or we've been doing this for a while, so we've got a little bit of money set aside in case something doesn't get paid.
How about your highlighted yellow there? How come that's so much lower for that year?
That's why it's highlighted in yellow.
Oh, you gotta go back and look at it.
Yeah, that, when I was doing it, it was just an odd number.
Yeah, it's really a lot lower.
It led me to believe that there's, either I didn't query the report right for that line, or there's an issue there.
Okay.
But, so I'll be checking on that between now and the time we approve it.
Transportation,
Transportation's about the same story.
it kind of went up, although we're going to cut a few positions, but they also got raises, so.
Yeah. Overall, $4 million budget last year, 4.2 this year, which you can see is a slight increase from actual. It's kind of stabilized around 3.5, but with the raises and just the increased costs in diesel fuel and whatnot, I don't think 4.2 or almost 4.3 is going to be too far off. Those expenses, all the expenses for transportation are 90% reimbursed. It takes about 2 years to get that money back, but
Kevin, how are we doing with our fuel budget?
Fuel, well, so far we've spent $368,000, and that's probably through March or maybe February, depending on when. I don't know if that bill got paid before I printed my report or not, but it's February, March, and we've spent 368. I budgeted 600, so we'll probably be fine.
Now, did you take into consideration we're going to have one or two buses that's going to be gas?
Well, I added about, no, not up. I probably need to add a little bit more here. I added $5,000. Well, I take that back.
Yeah.
I had $35,000 budget last year, and I'm budgeted $50. We're at 33. There may not be enough in that area. There may actually need to be a little bit more. It's about 3 buses, isn't it? You get 3
Did we
altogether?
get any of those buses yet?
We had 2. We may have gone forward with the third.
I think you
we
got
had 2.
one, and
We
then
have
we came
1,
back
and
and asked
then we
to
back
get
up
2
2
more.
more. I
Yeah.
think so. I think
But I
so.
thought that they dropped that one.
That's why I can't remember if we have 1.
Remember that one, that first one that we got approved?
And then they came back and asked for 2 more, but dropped the first one, I think.
Yeah,
That's why I was
think
thinking it
that's-
was 2.
Yeah, I think it's
Oh,
just
okay.
2.
But
Because I
this-
changed the minutes.
That probably does need to be up just a little bit.
Of course, that's less diesel, so, I mean, you know,
It'd be a little less, gas would be a little less than diesel.
Yeah. Yes, it should be.
well, diesel's kind of, gas is going up and diesel's kind of staying the same. It doesn't make any sense.
So I may adjust this one a little bit. Well, I have to remember that, before you see it again. 4.3 versus just over $4 million for next year. And then we have some payments. Those are our energy program that we have. That's about a $360,000 payment a year. Then we have a QSAP payment, which is about $86,000 to $90,000 a year. QSAP is qualified zone academic bonds, and we issued those as a capital lease on the HVAC equipment on Golly River. So at the end of that lease, we'll be wholly own all that equipment. And it's really just a financing mechanism at that time, back in 2012 and 14, the SBA required us to, even though because we were financially secure, they made us contribute 25% of the total cost. And so we didn't have 25% of $11 million at that time. And so we lease purchased a portion, $1 million worth of HVAC equipment, which were perfectly legal to do. And it's a very low interest way of financing. And so we lease purchased the HVAC equipment over a period of 15 years, I think. And so that's what this payment is.
So we're about in year 12.
So 3 or 4 years from now, that's paid.
I think 2026, I think that's when that matures. So we almost have that done.
How about that energy savings, how,
Well, that'll be a while.
are you
That's
locked
like
in on it?
2032.
I remember when you started.
I think it started like a year before I got here, a year or 2, 2014
Probably,
maybe.
it was a 15-year deal, so yeah, it probably about 2007. Was it before, it was right before you came?
It was before I came.
So it had been, must have been 2016 probably, or 15.
15, 14 or 15.
We adjust, that's when we changed all the LED lights and did some upgrades to some HVAC. And then we always budget $20,000 a year for the replacement of the turf up here. And that's just an ongoing thing. So grand total, no changes in that area, $470,000. Again, there's just a little bit, this payment will go down just a tiny bit. This one is going to stay basically $360,000 until it's matured. It's kind of a fixed price.
So is that when they came in and changed all the ballasts and did all of that?
And here, so at that time, the energy savings that we realized due to the change in LED and changing the envelope to the schools and doing some other features was going to save, again, don't quote me, just over $3 million. And so, again, it's a financing thing, and it's a low finance. So over a period of 15 years, we were going to save $3 million in energy savings. And so the board elected to, well, we're going to put another $1 million or some change with that. And upgrade, now we have $4 million, and we're going to do some other upgrades to aging HVAC systems. And so we were able to change some systems at Zela, I think Nicholas County High School, and Cherry River maybe. I think that was the 3 that we changed. So again, we were able to make those more efficient, realize some energy savings, and we'll have a low finance revenue. Then we get into the special ed area, and these salaries range from special ed instruction, speech, pre-K development, autism, psychology testing, OT and PT, instructional improvement, and we also have some money in there for overtime and substitutes. So in total, in the realm of special ed, we budgeted $4.7 million last year. We're right at $5 million for this upcoming school year. We don't have much in the way of overhead because they have some federal and state grants, and they take care of most of those expenses through those grants.
No, but the line for gifted and talented is blank.
It is. I will have to, it is, and again, I just take that off of the payroll budget that's from Lewis. I can go back and look and make sure that.
So maybe or that teacher is under another area somewhere.
It could be, it could be provided by a different program function, or maybe mostly is covered by another program function and dedicate some time to that. I'll go back and look at that again and make sure that there isn't a keystroke error there.
We did away with the gifted programs as such.
I don't know.
I know we used to have them, but we still haven't do it. I don't think we do.
We have a gifted teacher.
I mean, we have.
We used to have them in every school though.
Well, yeah, I mean, we provide enrichment for students and support.
But they had to have them in classrooms.
Well, what they used
I
to
don't know
do
how they
was,
had
I mean,
one day a week, those kids would,
meet.
they'd either go to Cherry River or to Summersville Grade School. Now, I don't know what they're doing now. Summersville Grade School has a teacher, right?
I know they did.
I think we used to have them in every building.
I'm
didn't we,
sure they
Gus?
did. I don't know, that's a good question. I really don't know the details on that.
I mean, that would cover, that might cover it well. wouldn't
Yeah,
it?
that's just one position. This would be one position
Yeah.
that was in this category. I'm sure, as you said, previously there was teachers that provided that in multiple schools that they may have been categorized for our purposes in instruction, but they also did gifted and talented as something supplemental. But I'll look and see.
They rotated, didn't they, Phil? Didn't they rotate from one school to another and have it on different days?
It depends on how the IEP is. It depends on if they're,
Yeah, they were under special ed, that program was.
and it may be there now.
It's an IEP.
But it used to be, some of them were an hour a week, and some of them were a full day. And in those cases, they'd ride the bus to another school that had a full-time teacher just for that, if they were all day. Now, I don't know. It's been a while,
But I just don't think it's set up the way it used to be. That's,
Yeah, I personally don't know. I'll do it now.
Well, that's an area that needs addressed, doesn't it? I mean, if you,
well, it'd be
It
interesting.
may be under special ed. I mean,
It was
it's-
under special ed.
I mean,
Different instruction.
yeah.
Yeah, it could be. I'll talk to, before you adopt this, I'll talk to Melissa and see how that instruction is delivered, or Sarah, and who we have and how they're coded.
Of course, we've got a lot of programs now that we didn't have then that kids can take.
Yeah, I mean, we still have Give, yes, as Priscilla, yes,
Yeah.
as a teacher, yeah. Yeah, so we do have the gifted teacher, so,
Okay. Again, 4.8, and so in this special ed program function, $4.8 million last year, we're just over $5 million this year. So as we look into vocational, covers positions for just, and I did it different. I started breaking this out into all the different teaching situations as opposed to a single line so that we could see it. But you have agricultural and natural resources, arts, AV, and tech and communication, health sciences, government and public administration, hospitality and tourism, then science, research and engineering, information technology, architecture and construction, and other vocational instruction, and then your administration at that school. And so last year we budgeted just over $1 million, and we're just over $1.1 million this year. They get $10,000 out of levy for supplies, and so we have that as well in that area. Alternative ed, this year we have $467,000 budgeted for that, and last year we budgeted $312,000. Community services hasn't changed. That's provided through the levy for the health department, 4-H, and the public libraries. Then we get into after school. After school instruction, $80,000 in our budget versus $67,000 from last year. And then when we get down into the coaching salaries, we're estimating coaching salaries for next year will be $473,000 versus $412,000 in the previous year. And then your band money, your athletic money, this parking at the Nicholas County Memorial Stadium has increased $1,000 over the last year to park around our stadium. So in total, in this extracurricular category, it's $653,000 versus $577,000 from the previous year. So the rest of this that's the bulk of the general fund. And the rest of this, I don't do the prior activity. It's really not necessary. Step 7 is a state grant that's provided for instruction. We use that instruction for, we're allowed to use 50% of it for personnel, and we use that for some counseling services. We allocate $18,000 to the schools for technology. TSS, $20,000, $200,000 for instructional supplies that we allocate out to the schools. And then the other half of the amount that is for technology and textbooks is right here at $435,000. So our total grant that's allocated through Step 7 for next year is $831,000 versus $759,000, and that number is determined by the state. And so we most generally spend that exactly as is, as budgeted. There's a small, I don't have any allocations for federal state grants yet for next year. So with the assumption that they're going to stay relatively the same as they usually do, I budgeted the exact same amount. So state special aid grants last year was $71,000, and we'll budget the same. I do know some of the salary costs, so I filled those in. But in total, we're at this point, we will budget that. And so a lot of times through the school year, or through the year, you'll hear me do a budget transfer, and I say, this is a reduction of the original budget, this is what we're doing. I'll budget this, and then at some point, we will get the grant amount, and I'll have to rebudget it into the correct lines as to exactly how we want to spend it. And so it could be more, it could be less. So anytime you hear me saying that, that's what we're doing. We're correcting this budget that we're unsure of exactly at this point. State vocational, $37,500. Required state staff development for professional and service, a total of $17,694. Bus replacement money, $367,000. She'll be back up to Senate. Curriculum trips is not required by the state anymore. However, I budgeted last year, but it's in another supply line. But I wanted to pull it out separate this year. I continue to budget that, and it's an allocation to the schools so that they can take, it helps them with their curriculum trips, their field trips for instructional activities. And so that's something that they always have used, and so I just wanted to continue it, even though we're not required.
And you allocate that out to the schools on a per pupil basis?
I do on a per pupil basis. Advanced placement, this amount of numbers calculated by the state, it's $4,500 for us. Teacher and leader induction, this is huge. This one's changed from $63,000 last year to $310,000. Again, it's calculated by the state, and it's for new teacher and principal training. So I spoke to Sarah about that, and with all the substitutes and the more permanent professional staff that we have, they need more training. And so this allows us to dedicate more training and resources to that area.
Who is responsible for that in the central office? Sarah?
Yes, Sarah, she does the teacher leaders.
So, and then any new principal, that's only for new principals and new teachers, or it can?
My instruction initially was it was for new teacher and new principal training. Now the state may have refined that a little bit to expand that, but as of right now, that's my understanding. Sarah is in contact with the person at the State Department, and we discussed that last week about what we would spend that on, or what she would want to spend that on, and she was going to reach out to the State Department to get guidelines that it could be spent for.
It's new for next year.
No, it's been around. It's been around for
with an increase. What I'm saying is.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, yeah, it was $50,000 and $60,000 the last few years.
Okay.
Does that include permanent subs? You said something about subs.
I said we have a lot of substitutes in the system doing long-term teaching things.
Right.
So
that could be used, or that is intended to be used in their training as well.
I would think, again, she's getting guidelines to see if that would be okay.
Oh, okay.
And
I would think if they're holding a teaching position, it would qualify.
that could pay, does that go for salaries as well to pay if they have to come in on a Saturday for training or something like that?
I would assume that it would be broad enough to, whatever's needed to provide instruction to those people.
But they haven't given us the guidance yet.
Well, I don't know. Sarah's checking on it to make sure before we make any commitments for the new year and to spend any of this money, we wanted to make sure that we knew exactly how it was.
Well, that's why I just wanted to clarify, because I don't want it to get out on the social media that people think that, say that it's said, Kevin has said that it's going to be available, so that's what I'm saying. We don't know for sure until we get the guidance.
Right.
It's available, but you want to make sure you
We
don't
spend it
spend it correctly.
Yes, yes.
Well, that might even include mental as, well, we'll have to wait and see, won't we? Yeah.
Step 7B is technology money that we use here, that we're allocated for to use for technology. So it went from $385,000 to $530,000, and again, those numbers are calculated by the state as to how much we're allocating for that. and they give us that much money for that. Alternative ed, a little small grant, state grant that we normally get, almost $65,000. Title II, $204,000. Title IV, $107,000. Title I, $1.5 million. Federal special ed money, just over $1 million. Rural low income grant, $72,000. Federal Carl Perkins grant, $78,000. And then we get down to food service, which is our final category, almost. This one we've worked with a lot over the last couple of days. Sherry and I have been going back and forth on how much this has increased. Food costs is unbelievable. It really is. And so you can see back here, we would budget for food $700,000, $711,000. 22 of them we budget, or this is actual. It topped out at just over $1 million. So far this year, we've already spent $1.2 million and budgeted 1.3. So we're going to be short in the food service area, and we're required to make that whole. So that's going to come out of county coffers to backfeed that balance to cover whatever this may be. Additionally, we got a couple of grants to pay for foods that we are purchasing. So outside of this total number in activity, there's about another $100,000 that you don't see that's being paid out of those grants that we would normally incur. And we won't not necessarily know that we're going to get that grant next year. So all said and done, we looked at this, and so I think we need to be about $1.5 million in food next year.
How much do we find out of the levy for that?
The levy, $325,000 probably, I think.
Now, is that, you still get money from,
Government reimbursement.
right?
Should be so.
Yes, I'll show you that when we get into revenue here. I'm going to mess my whole thing up here, guys. $325,000.
So does that help you balance out there? And you probably never balance out in food services. You've always got to supplement with local funds, other than the $325,000.
We always have to supplement with local funds. And the theory behind that is we have cooks that are hired under, and we're provided for state aid funding for cooks. And so part of the funding that we have to take out of the general fund where the state aid comes in has to go out to this. And so we call that the county contribution. And in theory, it's the monies for the cooks. But whether it's under or whether it's over what we actually receive for cooks, which no one really knows because they just give you a blank amount, we have to make this whole. So I'll show you when we get to revenue how much we're projecting that we're going to have to contribute to this program next year. And, another thing, when we're over in service personnel over the formula, so the money that we get from state aid, they don't tell you whether that's maintenance or whether that's secretaries or that's cooks and custodians. It's just, we're X number of people over, and this is how much money you're getting, essentially. So we're up in just about all these areas on budget for food service. So next year, almost $3.3 million for food service versus the 2.7 for this year. Last year, in 2022, I spent almost $2.8 million, and we're already up to 2.2 through March, probably. So that impacts what we can do. And then we have, these are our federal stimulus money, round 2 and round 3. There's There is money left in round 2, but the way our system works, the balance that's left in there now, since it's already budgeted, it will carry over in October. And so there's really not any new money for me to budget here. Even though I have budgeted for known salaries, we know that we'll have the revenues to cover that. And the state wants us to show those salaries as in our budget, so that's why you see that. But there's a much larger balance available, and it'll all come together in October. Same thing for round 3. Right now, we're anticipating $517,000 $517,000 worth of salaries to come out of round 3 next year. After next year, September 24, that money has to be spent, and so these individuals, those positions will have to be determined how you're going to handle that. So if you keep those positions, the general fund would have to absorb that cost, or you'd have to make cuts. I was pointing to this number for round 2. We had about 10 positions in round 2. The funding runs out this September for round 2, and so all of those positions were dealt with during personnel season and or transferred into the general fund for this next school year. So you won't have, this will be all liquidated by September. So, all that being said, at this point, our total estimated payroll for next year is $36.3 million. Last year is $34 million. That difference, they crunch that number, but it's probably mostly the pay increase. Everybody goes up a step, a year more of experience plus the pay increase. So that's more than likely your difference you're seeing there. Overhead expenditures, which is everything other than payroll, has gone up just under $2 million. So last year, our general fund budget, or our total budget, at this point was $44,667,000, and next year we're looking at a total budget of $48,772,744. $48,722,744. Any questions on the expense side? All right, so that $48 million has to be covered by revenue sources. How are we going to come up with $48 million to get through the next school year? All right, so our regular levy, as you can see, in 19 it produced 5.5, 6.1, 5.6, 5.8. So far, we've already received 5.5. I budgeted 4.3, so there's going to be some additional collections that's going to help out. As we move into the end of this year, you're going to see me supplement the budget for whatever we project this difference to be. And then let me talk about this second line first. Again, this is the excess levy collections, 4.3, 4.3, 4.7, 4.5, and so far this year we've already received 4.3, our budget was 4.2. And so next year you just approve the levy order and rate sheet, and in theory, it will generate $4,525,000, which is pretty consistent with FY22, and it's probably going to be the collections. We won't get a lot during April, May, and June, so it's probably going to be pretty close to meeting budget, or it'll be over probably, but probably not by much. Now, you see a huge difference right here in the regular levy. Last year was 4.3, and I'm budgeting 2.2. And the reason for that is I want to change how these numbers are presented. This is your state aid, and you can see last year was 16.7, and now I have in there 20.2, and that's just to help us reconcile back to the state more easily. They look at, there's two things that they want us to take out of, or They say this needs to come out of your state aid formula. And previously, I would take multiple things out of this account that we have to pay for, such as staff development, transfer to the food service program. There's several curriculum trips, and there were several things in the past that I would subtract out of here to get a net state aid. And so basically, I'm just switching that around. I'm taking everything with the exception of those two items that the state is asking us, or telling us, has to come out of there, and moving them up here to this line. So it's a little bit confusing probably, but this is the net amount of collections after we address some of these things that are in green. So the things that are in green are really going to be paid for out of local collections. But in order for me to budget it and pull it out separately here so that you can see it and give you a number, I have to reduce that revenue up here on the line that I anticipate coming in on. So it looks a little funny, and it'll straighten out over time, but it's going to be a better presentation.
So as a part of this voodoo economics, that line up there will basically be the same as last year if you add in the green areas.
Yeah, this number this year is $5,004,672. So it's up. I'm anticipating regular levy taxes to be just over $5 million. Okay. But I had to subtract all these other things from it in order to get down to that number.
And those would be the green areas you're pointing out down there.
Right. Okay, gotcha. If you'll remember, assessed values went up, so regular taxes go up. That means the state aid formula, the amount the state has to give us is less because our local collections are more. The great thing about this, the excess levy, is they don't get any of that. So last year we predicted it was going to be at 4.2, and this year it's going to be at 4.5. So that extra $300,000 as a result of the increase in assessed values, we did keep all that. And that'll help keep people employed. It'll pay for overages. It helps keep the system going. In fact, it may be even more than this, but time will tell. This is a great story. Our bank interest has gone, we're going to budget $350,000 in bank interest next year, and none of that is FEMA money. We don't get a whole FEMA money. That's just due to the balance you have and how we have it invested. And so we're coming off a horrible year of anticipated revenues to a lot better. So that's a big plus. Then there's some miscellaneous rents. We always have miscellaneous revenue, and it varies from reimbursements for insurance, it could be sale of fixed assets, just anything that doesn't really fall into one of these other categories that you'll see goes into miscellaneous. You can see this year we've already collected about $91,000. It was $117,000 in the year prior, so we're going to budget $100,000, and that'll probably be pretty close. I have that in red because we were working on that today. This is local collections for food service program. Excuse me. And then this is student activity. This is monies that were reimbursed from the school where they pay us for transportation costs to when they take field trips. They pay for fuel and the bus driver's wage and whatnot. This little number in red we're going to come back to, and we're going to talk about him in a little bit. But our total local revenues is $10,294,000, and compared to last year, which was $9.8 million. So let's come back to that in just a minute. If we look at state revenues, again, you see a difference in state aid of about $4 million. Our difference up here went down about $2 million. So the end result is we have about $2 million more in state aid than we had last year. And we had a slight increase in enrollment. That helps. PEIA went up about $70,000, $60,000. Retirement allocation, again, PEIA and retirement, they provide us enough to pay for the people that are funded under the state aid formula. Anyone we have hired over and above, the county has to come up with funds for that. And that includes days or supplements. This turned out a little bit better than what I thought it was going to. Last year we budgeted almost right at $1 million for our contribution to the food service program, and we're at about $1,042,000 for next year. So even though those costs are going up, our food service reimbursement rates from the federal government is also going up. And so therefore it doesn't require as much on our part to provide that. Normally, an average that we see normally in the food service program is that a county has to contribute 34 to 38% to the program. I think this was 27%. So all things considered, and an increase the costs of food, we still have a pretty low county contribution to the program, which it's good.
Isn't a lot of that due to Sherry Mao getting commodities and things like that? Is that what's helped that, or?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Sherry does a great job seeking out, she's very efficient in her ordering, and she tries to use as much commodities as possible, preparing menus that are not necessarily the easy prepackaged stuff. Sometimes they are more work on our part, but it does save costs. So her efforts has really shown over the last few years. Bus replacement money. So these are state revenues that come in. That's $367,000. Step 7, we talked about $831,000. Staff development, $17,006. Faculty Senate, $105,000. Curriculum trips, $5,500. Advanced placement, $4,500. That's the technology money, $530,000. And then this is the teacher and leader induction, $310,000. All of those, everything in here, with the exception of the curriculum trip money, is set by the state. This is their award for all those different categories. And then down here, $173,000, that's our state grants that we anticipate at this point. So $32,385,000 versus $28 million in the previous year. Then we get into the federal part. This is the federal ESSER monies, $517,000. Again, there's going to be more, but this is just the payroll portion that we anticipate for next year. So we know we're going to budget the expense side, so we're also going to know the revenue's there, so we're going to budget an offsetting revenue for the same amount. And then Medicaid reimbursement, we feel pretty confident will be around $250,000 again. Federal food reimbursements. Federal food reimbursements. Last year's 1.67, and I think we're going to be about $2.2 million next year. So there's almost $500,000 of additional federal revenue, and it's probably largely due to the fact that our reimbursement rate is going up for next year. Then the indirect cost. Indirect cost, we're allowed to charge indirect costs on the federal ESSER money, which was about $16 million. And we were going to realize a little over $1 million in indirect costs, which is essentially a percentage that the county is allowed to charge in order to provide or administer that grant for the federal government. And so all federal grants were allowed to charge a fee to administer the grant. Pay for some paper, pay for office space, pay for staff, whatever we need to administer that federal grant on the federal's grants behalf. So we decided that we're going to take that money and put that into our construction project. And so even though we feel like it'll be about $500,000 next year, I'm not putting it in this grant to make it available to spend because we're going to save it for the construction project. So the amount that we're really going to spend, that we predict, that's a standard amount before we got the federal stimulus money, is about $45,000. And then finally, the federal grants that we have budgeted right now is just over $3 million. Our federal grants are $3 million. So our total federal revenues is just over $6 million, which brings our total revenue budget at this point to $48,772,744.
Tim, a question on your food, the actual federal food reimbursement, that went up about $500,000. Do they give you a percent or a formula to figure that, or you just base it on what you see as far as reimbursement coming in recently?
No, they actually give us a, Sherry could explain it better probably, but it's a calculated rate. And like, we are reimbursed based upon the, it used to be how much free and reduced lunch was in the county, and so the higher that rate, in the county, the higher the reimbursement rate. And so they've changed how they do that now. We get a county-wide rate of 95%. So it's a 5% increase in that rate that may or may not be associated with free and reduced lunch. They call it a CEF rate now. But obviously it's going to help on the reimbursement.
With particular food costs.
Yes. We're coming out of COVID, and so we had, well, that's not it, but we had good reimbursement during that time period, and that was under a different federal program for food services. And now we're back to the standard food service program that we've been under traditional, but our rate increased through that process.
So overall, the budget's going up about $4 million.
Yep, $4 million. But we got to talk about this item in the red because it's about $2 million difference. And that $2 million difference is part of that $4 million difference. That is the county contribution to the budget. And I'll be honest, I have some concerns about where we're headed, just based on some trends and based upon what this number turned out to be. This is when everything's said and done, and I've got as much revenue budgeted and I have the expenses where I feel like they need to be, then it's down to, well, how far are we off? And we're off $3 million from budgeting, from balancing. And normally traditionally, from 2029 prior, it was about $1 million every single year. And then in 2020, we had to kick in $758,000. 2021, $1,278, or $1.2 million, almost $1.3 million. 2022, $1.8 million. For 2023, we were back down to $1.1 million. That same process and mindset on calculating how much we need, we're at $3 million. Food costs, overhead costs, all of that has driven that requirement to be higher. Our personnel over the formula, everybody over the formula got a raise. That has to be funded out of county funds. So it's worrisome to me for a couple of reasons, and just kind of keep this in the back of your mind as you're making financial decisions moving forward. We just finished our 2022, and I'm going to present that at the next meeting, our audited financial statements. But we just finished the audit on FY22, and we're showing about a $1.2 million profit, if you will. Okay? And so when we went into this budget in FY22, we needed to borrow $1.8 million to balance the budget. And so to end up with a $1.2 million profit, we had to cover this, which we did, we covered it through extra collections or reduced expenses. Somehow, some way, we didn't need this $1.8 million. And in addition to that, we were able to show a profit of $1.2 million. So all in all, from this budget year, there was about $3 million of either increased revenues or reduced expenses. So what that's saying now, and if this trend continues, that difference, I looked at the difference in what we need and what we actually end up with, and it varies between $3 million and $3.4 million. So in 22, it took you $3 million. The difference was $3 million, and you profited 1.2. If this comes to play, and we had the same activities we did in 22, you're going to need $3 million just to break even. You're not going to have any profit moving forward. It's going to be just to break even. So there won't be a net profit to use to spend for other items or as needed. So then we lean on, when we don't cover our expenses, naturally that digs into our contingency balance. And when your contingency is, where it is now, we're able to survive that and make adjustments and move forward. But if you have a very small contingency or bare minimum contingency, you will not survive very long when the county has to dig out of the hole every year. So this is kind of a light bulb for me that we could be on the edge of a downward spiral. If you look at our net income over the last, since 2020, we showed a profit of $2.6 million in 2020, $2.3 million, and I'm rounding these numbers, in 21, and then in 22, a $1.2 million profit. So profits are dwindling, even though it's a profit. We're not complaining about having a profit at all, but when you see this, if we knew what 23 was going to be, and I would dare say it's going to be close to 22 or maybe a little bit less, and then you look at these expenses predicted for the future, it's frightening a little bit. So as the board makes decisions moving forward, I think we need to consciously think about where we're at in order to break even and what reserves we may or may not have to rebound from that, and what we can afford that's not in this budget right now. Oh,
You made it bigger than that.
bigger than I should have done that a long time ago. Huh?
Now, so profit adds to the contingency fund? Is that what profit adds to the
Profit
contingency
adds to the contingency
fund?
Yes.
This is going to deduct from the contingency fund.
This will, so initially,
Make that larger and smaller now.
let me get back up here to the top.
It's too small.
Still doesn't want to stay big.
There you go.
All right. So you can see what we're talking about down here. Lost my track. Right, so these numbers right now, so when I go to budget this year, this $3 million, it's going to have to come out of our contingency. And then, let's say all the expenses played out and all the revenue played out just as we have a budget, and there wasn't a penny difference, then we would have actually taken out of our contingency balance $3 million. We would have lost money. We would not bring in enough revenue to cover our expenses.
So, Kim, why don't you just, you picked a bad color, red, why don't you just change it to green?
Green means that it's so naturally, our goal is we want to replace what we took out initially, and then our goal is not to make money, but we want to be on the top side of that break-even point.
Yeah.
But the profits we've had went into contingency the past few years.
Yes. Yeah,
I think he asked that, yeah.
You know, our contingency balance now is a result of years of profits. And most years we have a small profit. We've have dipped down, like 2015. 2015 was a small profit of $352,000, but 2016 we had a loss of $552,000. So what we borrowed, we used every bit we borrowed and spent some more. Right? No, we dipped in. We weren't able to replace all of it. We were short. We used $552,000. In the next year, we had a $182,000 loss, and then since then, since 2018 and plus, it's been profits every year. So I just wanted you to see this, kind of give you an idea.
I can't see that total. What is it, 2 million?
3 million.
3 million?
$12,697.
That's how much you're having to take out of contingency in order to balance this budget.
Right. And your unfunded, I'll get into this next week, because we're going to talk about your funding balance, your unassigned fund balance. Right on your 2022 financial statements, your unassigned fund balance was $12,295,000. But there are certain things out of that $12 million we'd already taken out this amount for this year's budget. We're going to take out of that this number for next year's budget, and then we have to have at least a 3% contingency, and then that's the realistic amount of unfunded contingency you have.
So you're looking at least $45 million coming off.
Right now, right now I'm thinking that's going to be about $5 million coming off of it.
Off of the 12.
Off the 12.2.
So you're down to 7.295.
Yeah. And then there's some committed funds that we'll talk about next week, or next time, but unassigned funds, unencumbered funds, you're going to be right around $7 million.
Are there any limitations on how that can be spent?
The unassigned funds?
Yeah.
It's at the board's discretion. Any questions on your budget? So what I'll do, I will bring this to you to adopt on the second meeting in May. And between now and then, I will probably make some adjustments, some minor adjustments. I'll keep track of those so I can point those out to you on that meeting. We won't go through this again. I'll point out any changes I make, and then I'll ask you to adopt the budget. We'll also have a budget hearing on that date for the public to ask questions, and then I'll ask you to adopt that final budget as our next year's budget.
When's the budget due at the state?
May 30th.
That's in When was the budget due at the state? The state?
When's the public hearing?
It'll be the day that you adopt it.
May 15th.
Oh, okay.
May 15th, yeah.
We just list that first, right?
We'll usually do that at the top of the meeting, and then we can adopt the budget down in finance.
How far in advance will you send us that to look at?
I can send you this now, if you want, and you can get, if you want to take a look at that.
Well, you're gonna make some adjustments.
I will likely make a few minor adjustments. It has to be on, this will probably be, it has to be on public comment for 10 days prior to that meeting. So by probably May 5th, by May 5th at the very latest, I'll have it available on our website, which is probably going to be what I present to you. So you'll have, I'll try to get it to you on May 5th. Usually there's not a lot of adjustments. When I go to punch it in, if I see an error that I made, or like there's a field question you had, or area I need to adjust, this is pretty much how it'll land.
So when you put that in, will you make sure all the pages are going one way?
I will do my best.
Sometimes it won't let you flip them two
Well,
back.
but I have fixed them and switched them around and put them in, and when I scan them in, they'll still flip one or two of them.
Well,
It has a mind of its own.
It has a mind of its own.
Doesn't have
I can
to
give
be
you
yours.
a printed copy, to make it a lot easier. We can print some.
let's see, when's our board?
We should have one on the 1st and 15th. Right.
First and 14th?
First and 15th.
First and 15th.
Does it, yeah, it's first and 15th. You said, does it have to be out for public view for 10 days? Is that 10 calendar days or 10 business days?
10, I think it's always been 10 calendar days in the past.
Okay.
So we'll put it on our website, and I'll probably have it ready for that.
Okay.
Any other questions?
It was very clear.
Well, thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Hess?
The public hearing will be what you put on the website,
Mm-hmm.
and it'll be there for 10 days.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, and then if the public has any questions, they're welcome to come in and ask any questions they might have about the budget.
Do you generally get very many?
I've never had anybody.
Well, it's a big thing to, I
We
mean,
do this every year, and there's never.
most people don't, I mean, they don't know what they're looking at. I mean,
Yeah, it's a lot to digest, and, you know, we all know the inner workings of how it all works, but somebody in the public, it's confusing maybe, or it's just maybe overwhelming sometimes.
okay. Anybody have anything else? Mr. President?
You did? Oh.
Mr. Pride, you want to take a recess until he returns, or?
He'd be right.
Okay.
We think.
Send that back down here.
Oh, would you get something? What makes me feel bad, he only gets one piece of candy. I take 4 or
It's
5.
not like us.
I saw a fence this past week, that might work down there, this is the closest thing that I could find. But the way they had it in Oak Island was these were 4x4s.
That's what we were thinking about.
Your crew up there at the Superior Technical Center, they could do that.
I don't really want to make it in public.
Oh,
8 foot, 4 cut in half, yeah. Put the half, 2 foot down the ground.
18 inches around.
Yeah, they had, at Oak Island, they had that public each access beside the presidential mental home. And so they had them right there so people could park on private property.
We had thought about that, unfortunately, trying to change your road or something.
Unassigned, we had one 12.2.
Well, they had.
I like the audio.
Certain things that the commission had in their names, and that leaves about the net.
I know some of them. I might give you a call.
Thank you.
3 was taken out. After you took out that.
Yeah, you called me.
3, that's.
Okay, do we have a motion to adjourn? Mr. Berry makes a motion.
I'll second.
Mr. Green seconds. All in favor? Aye. At 6:50.
There's a couple other things, and then we.